Welcome to another video from ExplainingComputers.com. This time we're going to look at the Nobara Linux distro. This is based on Fedora with a number of fixes and third-party packages added to provide a better experience for gamers and content creators. Personally, I'm most interested in the improved user interface and running video editors and related creative applications. However, in this video, I'll also highlight the aspects of Nobara that make it an excellent distro for Linux gamers. Nobara has been created by a software maintenance engineer called Thomas Kreider, also known in the Linux community as Glorious Eggroll. As the distro's web pages make clear, Nobara is not an official Fedora spin. Rather, it's an independent distro that uses Fedora packages, code and repositories and adds bug fixes and various third-party packages to help out gamers and content creators. As we saw in my review earlier this year, Fedora is an excellent workstation distro. But it uses a pure GNOME interface that can be a shock to new users. And by default, Fedora lacks many third-party packages needed to most successfully run applications like video editors and games. So, what exactly does Nobara add to Fedora? Well, the full list is listed here on this page. There's lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of stuff, but the most notable additions include automated installers for third-party video codecs, NVIDIA graphics drivers and proprietary AMD drivers. In the official version, a number of pre-enabled desktop extensions, pre-installed Linux gaming packages including Steam, Wine, Lootrix, G-Overlay and the ProtonUp Qt GUI, a post-installation option to install Blender, Kdenlive, OBS Studio and Discord along with various plugins and patches, and finally pre-installed DaVinci Resolve dependencies allowing the easy installation of a DaVinci Resolve video editor. So let's head on over to the download page where we discover there are three versions of Nobara: official, GNOME and KDE. And just to anticipate some people typing in the comments, the second one of these is pronounced GNOME. The G is stressed because it stands for GNU Network Object Model Environment. It's got nothing to do with small creatures you might find in your garden. Anyway, back to Nobara, and the only difference between the three versions are the desktops they use, and as you would probably guess, GNOME and KDE use GNOME and KDE desktops, whereas the official version is based on GNOME with some excellent pre-installed extensions. And so here we're going to use the official version, so let's scroll down so we can download it. There are some links here and we'll click on that one over there, and F11 to give us a bit more space on the screen so we can read the end user license agreement. And there's several important things to note, not least that Nobara is a hobby distribution and that it is not an official Fedora spin. So we need to accept this, go down to the bottom of this agreement, and if I can find the bottom of it with this scaling here, and agree, like that. And then we can now download the ISO, although as you can see I've already done that. So if we now use Etcher to write the ISO to a bootable USB drive, we'll be all set to try out Nobara. Right. We're now booting my i5 test rig from our Nobara USB, and we will test the media and start Nobara as you can see. And I've disconnected the Windows and other Linux drives from this system, so the only attached internal drive is a blank SSD on which we're going to install Nobara. And after installation, I can always reconnect the other drives and select an operating system using the BIOS boot menu, which these days I think is a far better multi-boot option than relying on grub. Anyway, the Nobara installer has now run up, and I'll just tweak some settings so we can see things more clearly. There we go, although I don't seem to be able to set a large mouse pointer at this stage, but I can cope with that, and it has correctly identified my language, so we will continue. And on this screen we now need to set the installation destination, which is going to be our SSD. There we go. And I'll create a user, which is going to be EC, and I'll put in a password. And I'm also going to enable the root account. You don't have to do this, but I like to have it available if necessary. Again, I'll put in a password. And there we are, all ready to begin installation, which is a painless process that will just speed on through. And there we are, it's finished. We now need to click on Finished Installation and presumably reboot the computer. And with our USB drive removed, we're now booting into our freshly installed copy of Nobara, and after installation is where the magic and the fun begins. So I'll log in. There we go, and once again I'll make a few scaling changes. There we are, and as you can see, the welcome screen has run up and there's various important post-installation options. First, as you can see, we have an option for video playback and encoding enablement, in other words, installing video codec, so clearly we'll do that. And as frequently here, I'll need to enter my password. And next, Nobara has identified I've got an NVIDIA graphics card, so we'll install the NVIDIA drivers for that. And it appears we need to update to the latest kernel to use the NVIDIA drivers, so helpfully Nobara is doing that for us too. There we are, and hardly surprisingly, a reboot is required. And here we are back again, and presumably this time it'll work and we install the NVIDIA drivers. And there we are. We can now make proper use of our installed graphics hardware, although once again we need to reboot. And here we are back again, and this time nothing pops up, but if we click down on First Steps, you can see we've already installed the patented media codecs and libraries and our NVIDIA graphics drivers, and I'll do some system updating a bit later on. So let's click down to Recommended Additions, where, as you can see, we've got options to install Blender, the Kdenlive video editor, and the OBS Studio video recording and live streaming application, and Discord. And I'm going to do the first of these, so I'll click on Install for Blender and it'll get on with it, and Nobara should configure everything correctly on our system. And Blender has now entered the building. We're all ready to blend, so we'll move on to Kdenlive. And with Kden in our team, we'll now install OBS Studio. And there we go. We should now have properly configured installations of 3 very useful creative applications. So let's now click on Optional Steps. And here, first of all, we've got options to install proprietary AMD drivers, as well as AMD's ROCm drivers, none of which I need because I don't have an AMD graphics card. But if you do, these are clearly very useful options. Similarly, I don't have any controllers that require an X1 driver, so I won't use this option here. And finally, for me, I also don't need to install Proton GE, which is a compatibility tool that allows Steam to run Windows games here on Linux. So if you're a gamer, this is a great option to install. Finally, here in the welcome screen, we'll click on Look and Feel, where there's all sorts of options available. We can choose a desktop layout, for example, by clicking over here and decide what we want to use. I think I'll go with traditional. Presumably we now have a menu down here. We do. But now I think I need to experiment at my leisure to get Nobara set up just as I like it. And so I think now it's time for an intertitle. Greetings! Here I am back again, and I've now let Nobara install lots of updates, although it looks like it wants to install even more. There's no meeting the appetite of a modern operating system for updates, is there? They always want more. Anyway, I've now made a lot of visual changes using the standard GNOME settings, as we can see here, but I've also been using GNOME Tweaks, which is a pre-install, which allows you to change lots and lots of stuff. Great control here of fonts and everything else. Really good to have this pre-installed. And also pre-installed is a menu editor. I've now got a Linux Mint type of menu, which is rather nice. And the way I did that was going down here and right-clicking and going to the settings for Arc Menu. And this again is a fantastic extension to have pre-installed here in Nobara. We can change things like menu layouts. Here I'm using the Mint layout as I've just said, but you can pick all kinds of different menu layouts. Lots and lots of things are available. You can even have a Windows one if you really want, but I've got a Mint layout. And again, when you go inside that, you can edit everything in that layout. You can edit things in the theme, or you can override the theme, which is what I've done. So here, for example, I've changed the size of the fonts in the menu to be different to the main system font sizes, which I think is a very handy thing to be able to do. You've just got so much control, just like you used to have back in Windows 3.1, although we don't have in most modern operating systems today. And here, as you might be able to see, I've even set my own highlight color. I quite like that yellow highlight on the menu. I find that nice and easy to see. And also here you can customize other stuff, height and width of things as it comes across. All sorts of settings are available in the Arc menu. And finally here, I've set up the panel by right-clicking on the panel and going to Dash to Panel settings, because Dash to Panel is also pre-installed. It struggles with some of my font sizes, but never mind. Other than that, again, masses and masses of control. And I'm sure some people are saying in the comments, well, Chris, all you're doing here is using GNOME tweaks and Dash to Panel and Arc menu to customize a Linux distro. And that is true, but they do all happen to be pre-installed here in Nobara, all working together, and it allows you to have a fantastic control of your desktop environment. Moving on from the desktop, let's take a look at what's pre-installed. We know some of this because I mentioned it earlier and we actually installed it ourselves, but there's various accessories, including Wine Tricks, because Wine is pre-installed here for running Windows applications. And if we look under Games, we've got Steam. I'm not a Steam user myself, but if you are a Steam gamer, you've got Steam pre-installed, which you'll find very handy. Let's get rid of that, go back to Games. We've also here got Lutris, we've got G-Overlay for doing your Vulkan setups, that type of stuff. This is not something I've used myself, but I know some gamers find this very handy, so there we are. And also installed here, we've got various things under graphics, most notably Inkscape and Blender, which we installed ourselves. We don't have GIMP pre-installed, which is I think slightly surprising, but here is Blender. Always good to see Blender, although I think there's so much complexity here, we'll leave this for another day, for another video. Under Internet, we've got the usual kind of stuff. Under Office, we've got only Office. I find that slightly surprising, and personally, I would install LibreOffice. Under Programming, there's various things available. And under Sound and Video, we know we've got Kdenlive because we installed it, and here it is running up, no problems at all. And also under Sound and Video, we've got OBS Studio. We installed that as well, and that runs up too. Oh look, it's me. Hello everybody. I've got a camera plugged in just to test this out. So if I click on the Start Recording like that, we can make a video inside a video. How exciting is that? But probably that's enough. So let's stop recording and come out of OBS like that. And if we go to videos, and I think I've got a folder I have over there, and hopefully here is the video we have made. Isn't that exciting? Me talking to me gets very, very confusing, doesn't it? But there we are. We've proved a point. OBS is clearly working here in Nobara. And just to finish off our tour of the menu, under System Tools, there are a few things there. Various utilities. Always got to have a few utilities, haven't you? Like that. And finally under Other, we've got a few other things that weren't listed elsewhere. And so there we are. I'm very impressed with this, with the UI customization and the pre-installed software in Nobara. Right, and I thought we'd see how easy it is to install the DaVinci Resolve video editor here in Nobara. As you may know, DaVinci Resolve is a fantastic application with both free and paid versions available for Windows, Mac and Linux. However, the Linux version only officially supports CentOS, and even though some third-party install scripts are available, it can be difficult to get DaVinci Resolve running in Linux. However, Nobara has all of the required dependencies included, so as detailed on its web pages down here, it should be straightforward to install DaVinci Resolve. Where is it? Hiding down here somewhere? There we are. Here is the section about DaVinci Resolve. And earlier on, I visited the Blackmagic Design website, and selected to download the free version of the package for the Linux operating system. And after filling out my details, I registered and downloaded a zip file, which I've got here in my Downloads folder. And the instructions on the Nobara website detail how to install DaVinci Resolve from this file using a terminal. And if you have an AMD graphics card, as it talks about here, you'll have to do part of the install in the terminal, because after installing, you have to execute this command. However, with an NVIDIA graphics card, we can simply extract the file in the file manager like this, extract here. There we go, it'll get on with that. And when it has completed, thank you very much, we can open this up and execute the installer, and we should be able to install straightforwardly DaVinci Resolve. So I'll work through the installer, and as usual, enter my password. And once again, enter our password. There we are, DaVinci Resolve is now installed on our system. Although, do remember, if you're installing on a system with an AMD graphics card, you still need to execute this command in the terminal, although I don't need to do that here because I've got an NVIDIA graphics card on this computer. And here we are, we can now run up DaVinci Resolve, which is very exciting, although do be aware you'll get a black square on the initial startup as it fails to render the welcome screen. But you can simply force quit on that, as you can see, that's not a problem, and it will now run up, taking its time on the first run, but it will eventually complete. We can open an untitled project, and here we are running DaVinci Resolve in Nobara Linux. And oh look, it's offering us an update. I think we'll skip that for now. We're excited enough to have got the thing running here. This is very, very good indeed. DaVinci Resolve running here in Nobara Linux. And just to check everything's working properly, I'm going to come out of the package like this, and we'll go in again, and it should run up nice and quickly on the second run. We'll see this in real time, and yes, that was nice and fast. And I think I'll now bring in some clips and set up a little edit. There we go, everything seems to be working okay. Here's a couple of clips from my recent Orange Pi 800 film. Let's just Control F, view this full screen. This footage needs grading, but it clearly is working. We should have a transition in a second, and that's working okay, I think, as well. That's fine. So clearly, DaVinci Resolve is working here in Nobara Linux. This is an English UK keyboard layout. As you probably gathered, I really like Nobara. My only caution is that it's a hobby distro created by a single individual, if a very talented member of the Linux community, and there is no doubt that Nobara offers content creators and gamers an excellent out-of-the-box experience. But now that's it for another video. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here, please press that like button. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and I hope to talk to you again very soon.